So yesterday marked the end of the Monstercat mix contest for 2018, and over the time that the contest has been going on, I decided to take some time out because I was bored and I still really wanted to I wanted to spend my time doing something, because all I could think about was the mix contest, if I'm going to be completely honest. I was like stressing about it, so I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to listen to a bunch of mixes, and I ended up not listening to many mixes, but in the meantime, I decided to make a spreadsheet of every single submission with a ton of different statistics about the mix. Along the way, while I was making this, a couple people got interested in the sheet that I was making. A couple of people, including Ethan, Barry, Fruit, Monster, and Depths. So together, this team of peoples, we got together. Oh, and Flux as well. We got together and completed this sheet. And so basically, we have all the statistics we could probably think of. We've got stuff like the day they submitted, the artist that submitted, how many people submitted, what tracks they used, and stuff like that. And I thought this video would be kind of interesting to kind of give a synopsis and maybe some statistics here and there about what the mix contest has kind of been all about, I guess. I think one thing I should clarify before I get into this is I'm still kind of debating whether or not I want to make this public. There was an initial sheet that was public, and originally I didn't want it to be public, like out to the public. I wanted it to be within the small group chat, and some people took the link and started sending it around, and so I remade the sheet into a more private one, so only like 2 or 3 people have access to this sheet that is not editor. I am still considering whether I want to make this public, mainly because I don't want people to somehow think that this sheet is 100% fact, because what we decided to do is we also have a column where we decided whether or not somebody would be considered qualified or disqualified. And what I didn't want to happen was I didn't want people to come to this sheet and think to themselves, oh shoot, I'm disqualified because Duality says I was disqualified. I want, if I'm gonna make this sheet public, I'm gonna make it after the finalists have been announced, because I don't want anybody to think that somehow like I had anything to do with I don't know, deciding the finalists, or somehow like maybe I could have had a chance to warn you guys if your mix ended up being disqualified, and I could have had a chance to tell you. That's not something that I really want to, you know, get my hands into or whatever, because I don't feel like it's my responsibility to tell you or warn you that your mix could have been saved or whatever. But anyways, I'm not going to bother with that any longer. I think one of the first things we're going to start off is the number of people that submitted. So the last 2 contests, Dan has been pretty adamant on saying that 600 people or more applied to the contest. In 2015, I would say that was probably factual and nobody really argued it. In 2016, when he said 600 people, a couple people were a bit skeptical on it, so we're not too sure. Obviously, Dan hasn't told us how many people there is this year, but the exact number of people who applied for the contest this year is 256 people who have applied to the contest. So that's definitely a huge drop since 600, right? And right then and there, if we were to if the whole contest was based on, you know, randomization, sort of like the lottery, I guess, 8 slots in the finals, 256 submissions, you have a 3% chance of being a finalist. So that's pretty alright. Of course, it's also going to depend on whether or not your mix is actually good. If your mix is bad, you're going to have less of a chance, and if your mix is really good, you're going to have a better chance. On to the next thing I'm probably going to talk about is the disqualifications, because though there have been 256 people who applied, there was a massive amount of people who got disqualified. Well, now here's the issue that might be a little bit iffy, right? Because we obviously disqualified people based on whether or not they use Monstercat music or not. We disqualified people based on whether or not they had the mandatory tracks. But one of the issues and one of the more iffy parts is that we disqualified people, or marked people as disqualified, on the time of their mix, because obviously in the rules it said that you could only have a maximum of 15 minutes. And then after some clarification, but this was more on the private section, what I believe it was either mentioned in the mix or it was mentioned in like DMs with other people, is that your mix could have plus or minus 1 minute of buffer. So if your mix was a minute 16 minutes, or it was 14 minutes, your mix would technically be fine because you had that 1 minute buffer. But then if your mix was 13:59 or 16:01, then it's like, okay, you know what, we're off there. And of course, that I would say that the rules this year, I don't recall the rules like the previous years, but this year I think the rules were kind of not abstract, but they weren't very definitive at times. And I feel like that's definitely something that Dan should consider in the following contest, if this is a thing that happens in 2019, 2020, whatever, is that you have to be very specific in exactly what you're looking for and what is going to get you revoked from the contest, because obviously not a lot of people listen to the example mix. That's something I didn't do last year. And one of the things, and in the rules, the only rules that I could like strictly remember is you're only allowed a mix that is maximum 15 minutes, and you're only supposed, or you must use 3 of the 6 mandatory tracks. It doesn't say anywhere in the rules that you can only use Monstercat released music. So obviously there is going to be a little bit of iffy, you know, what we're saying right now is what we believe would be the number of disqualified people, not actually the number of disqualified people. So anyways, number of people who qualified out of the 256 is 176 people. So let me just quickly put that in a calculator. So of the 256 people that applied, 68% of people were qualified. So already 32% of people have already basically been kicked out of the competition, or at least we believe to be kicked out of the competition. We had 5 people who were not sure if they were disqualified, and that's mainly because some people decided to use different samples that weren't actually specific songs, or they might have used a non-Monstercat song, but we weren't sure because we couldn't figure out if the song was non-Monstercat. There was one guy, I forget his name, but he used World Cup samples, and that was all part of his world building and like telling a story, because that was obviously something that Dan was looking for. And so even then there, it's like, well, you could argue, you know, it's open to the public, it's like, you know, what is it called, fair use, but it's not Monstercat music, so we wouldn't know if that would be considered disqualification or not. It's definitely not something I've ever seen somebody do before, so it is interesting, but you know, that's gonna have to be up in the air for Dan to decide. So back to the thing we were talking about, time. We had 36 people, oh no, my bad. We had 32 people that were disqualified because they used non-Monstercat music. 100% we know it was non-Monstercat music. We had 6 people whose mixes were too long. So their mixes was longer than 16 minutes. And we had 36 people who were underneath the 14-minute threshold. And that's why we're a little bit iffy, because there were some people that had good mixes and some people that had, you know, they were doing their best, they followed all the rules, but there was never at any point that said that your mix could not be less than 14 minutes. I'm not gonna name any off the top of my head, but there are some artists that were some mix submissions that I thought were pretty good, but their mixes were 13 minutes, 13:30 kind of stuff. So it's like they were good, but they just didn't use all their time. I guess you could argue against that. Dan would be like, you know, you didn't use all of your available time to, you know, the best of your ability, so that's why you didn't get qualified. But you know, there's that. Let's talk about the songs. There were 6 mandatory songs that we could have chosen from, that being The Drop, What's Going Down, and Push It, the 3 Uncaged songs, and Something Real, Take Me There, and Another Night, the 3 Instinct songs. Now, unsurprisingly, the Uncaged songs were used a lot more often than the Instinct songs. The most used song was The Drop, which was used 168 times in people's mixes out of the 256. The second most popular one was Push It with 162 times, and then third was What's Going Down with 151 uses. Now going into the Instinct tracks, it wasn't that far behind, I would say. I didn't expect the Instinct tracks to be used as much, but the most used Instinct track was Another Night with 106 uses. Secondly, we had Something Real with 95, and then the least used track was Take Me There by Conroe with 93 uses. The last thing that I guess I have right here at the ready is the number of people who submitted on different days. So unsurprisingly, there were people submitting every single day. There were some days where people submitted more than other days. The day that people submitted the least a number of mixes was on June 19th. There was only one singular person who submitted. Meanwhile, and very unsurprisingly so, on July the 4th, the final day yesterday, we had 59 additional submissions. So yeah, other than that, there isn't really much of a correlation. There was just people submitting randomly. Like there'd be some days where there'd be 5, some days where there would be 15, so there's not much to comment on that. But yeah, that is all that we've really got to. I guess the last thing we could talk about is, because we have every single like time and whatnot, we could talk about some of the I guess the more extremes when it comes to, you know, people with the longest mixes, people with the shortest mixes, and other stuff like that. So there was one person, if I can find it, his mix, he submitted a mix, this person, and it was 20 minutes and 55 seconds. So congrats to you for being the longest mix. That's definitely not something to be proud of, because that does mean you're eliminated for many reasons. Though sadly, this person was eliminated not because his mix was 20 minutes and 55 seconds, but because his audio file was 20 minutes and 55 seconds. He had like 5 minutes of silence at the end. Though, even removing the silence, his mix ends officially, I would say, about at 16:30, so he was still eliminated for that. The winner for the shortest mix, and I'm gonna say this person's name because this person, I'm so confused about, is Trills and Friends. He submitted on the same day that I submitted, and his mix was 3 minutes and 4 seconds. And this guy kept on saying, you know, we're working on it with friends, we're going to be, you know, updating it as it goes on. He never updated it. He submitted it on June 16th, never once fixed it. So, I mean, good for you, mate. You got the shortest mix, and you somehow also managed to stay on the front page for whatever reason. I don't know why people voted you, but anyways, that's that. One thing I didn't account for, because we had a couple of like expressions that would automatically count up, you know, how many people were disqualified, how many weren't. One of the things we didn't count for was how many people got exactly 15 minutes on the dot. So I just quickly scrolled through it, and if I recall correctly, there were actually 13 submissions that got exactly 15 minutes, so that's pretty good on you. I don't think you would get any extra bonus points for having exactly 15, but I thought it was pretty neat that there was actually, I didn't think so many people would get 15, but at the back of my mind, I also felt like there would be a lot more people that were going to aim for exactly 15, though that isn't exactly the easiest thing to do, obviously, as you know, you don't really predict for when the end of the mix is going to happen until you reach the end. So there is that. The mix with the most plays was Syndrome with 2,200 plays. That was rounded if I recall correctly. And it was also Syndrome with the most likes, of totaling up to 110 likes. Syndrome was the only person to have more than 100 likes, and Syndrome wasn't the only person to have more than 1,000 plays, but if I recall correctly, there were only 4 people in the entirety of the contest that managed to amass more than 1,000 plays. So I guess congrats to the 4 people, that being Nova, myself, Syndrome, and Funky Dwarf. So yeah, there is that. I think one of the things that some people kind of saw is, I mean, this is an arbitrary thing, but we decided to include how many songs people used in their mixes, and the person who used the most songs used 53 songs. That's quite a lot to fit in. At some point, you would have used too many songs that your mix would probably sound cluttered. Very few people can fit so many songs and make it sound good. So yeah, the most amount of songs used was 53, and the least amount of songs used was 3, because some guy decided to submit a mix with only the 3 mandatory songs. So I guess congrats to you. Anyways, that's really all the stuff that I could really pull out of this mix spreadsheet. Again, I don't know if I'm going to make it public, but if I'm going to make it public, it's going to be made public after the mix contest has started and is gone underway. But yeah, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this. There were some other statistics that I probably could have like decided on, but I mean, I don't really feel like counting through this. And I mean, if people were genuinely curious, they can find out the sheet later. But that's all. That's all that's gonna be from me. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm probably gonna upload a mashup tomorrow. Just keep your eyes peeled on that. And yeah, that's all for me. I'm gonna see you guys later. Bye.